So I like to talk about Antonio de Torres. He was really a magnificent guitar maker. I mean, all of our luthiers, we have a starting point, and most of our classical guitar makers, we start with Antonio de Torres, this work that he did, and we learn a lot from him. I mean, he didn't really invent the modern classical guitar as it is today, but he used what was established in the early 19th century, and intuitively he rearranged the soundboard, bracing, strutting. He used different plantillas, big and small, and even on the scale length of the guitar, he used different scale lengths. And sometimes working with inferior materials, he created exceptionally outstanding guitars. In 1864, Torres built a guitar for himself, for his personal use. And I don't think he realized at the time that that guitar would become an iconic instrument over time. This guitar is also known as the FE17, as catalogued by Jose Romanilos. So a few months after he made the guitar, Francisco Tárrega came to visit him. And I think he had in mind that he wanted to buy a guitar from Torres. And he played a few guitars, but he wasn't very satisfied. But he was looking for something more special. So Torres took out this FE17 guitar and he showed it to Tárrega. And Tárrega started playing on that. And then Torres was so moved by the playing of Tárrega that he actually gave that guitar to Tárrega. Now that is amazing, because as a luthier, I can kind of imagine what must have happened that day. You know, once you finish a guitar and someone that comes to play it, that can play as well as Tárrega played that day, it's the ultimate, it's the cherry on the cake. But Tárrega also, he was so in love with this guitar. He composed a lot of his early music on that. And he continued to play it for more than 40 years. my inspiration to build this guitar came from Peter Henning, a dear friend and client of mine. And I let him tell the story of how it came about, that he came to me and said, "Hans, can you build this guitar for me?"
Torres FE17 is an iconic instrument in the world of the classical guitar. I was searching the internet to learn more about maple as a guitar wood. That was when I came across a YouTube video of Richard Savino playing this exquisite instrument. It was a perfect replica of Torres FE17. Of course, at that moment I knew nothing about this famous instrument. What I saw and what I heard just captured my imagination. It was love at first sight and sound. So I called my luthier friend Hans van der Berg and I described to him what I've seen and what I've heard. And I said, "Hans, can you build me an instrument like that?"
A few luthiers in the world took on the challenge to replicate this guitar. And I've looked at their work. It's quite amazing. But in my opinion, maybe only a couple of them succeeded in building a true replica. Because if you study the detail of the Torres guitar, you can see that certain elements is very, very challenging to make. And if you look at the replicas, then you can see that some of the replicas were simplified. I accepted the challenge to try and make every little bit the same. So fortunately, I managed to get a book. This was my source of information, Masterpieces of Guitar Making by Stefano Grondona and Luca Walter. This book has got really lovely pictures of the instrument. I studied this with a magnifying glass, and I didn't have the opportunity to look at the actual instrument. And then there's the other one by Jose Romanillos, Antonio de Torres, Guitar Maker, His Life and Work. Very valuable work from Romanillos, giving the technical information that one requires to build this instrument. So the first thing that struck me when I started making this guitar is how light the instrument was. I was reluctant to work the material as thin as Torres worked it. And I realized that with the doming of the soundboard, he actually increased the dome of the soundboard a bit more than we normally do. He was able to work the soundboard as thin as 1.5 millimeters. Now that's incredibly thin. And it immediately imposed a new challenge for me, because my inlay work is normally 1.5 millimeter deep. Now if I have to do the edging, the purfling and that, which is normally 1.5 millimeter deep, and the soundboard only 1.5 millimeter thick, that's problematic. So I overcame that by making the perimeter a bit thicker, and then do the inlay and then work it afterwards, work it to the thickness which I want, which is that 1.5 millimeters. even the strutting of the soundboard. Torres uses a flat strut of only 2 millimeters, if I remember correctly, only 2 millimeters deep and about 7 wide. One would think that that wouldn't give the adequate support for the total tension of about 45 kilograms. But it really worked. Amazingly, it worked. I'd like to point out some of the difficulties that I faced with, as far as the inlay materials are concerned. The first I'd like to point out is the Greek meander pattern. So there's about 36 tiles, I think, if I remember correctly, over the back, in the back. And one has to start with a full tile and end with a full tile. So that was quite a challenge because the actual tile size had to be very accurate. Otherwise you would start with 3/4 of a tile or half a tile. And in some of the replicas that I looked at, you can see that's very obvious that they battled with that. Also here in the tail end, had to start with a full tile and end with a full tile, but not changing the actual dimension of the guitar, depth of the body. Some of the other challenges that I faced, which was probably the most difficult for me to make, was this small lozenges on the purfling of the rosette and also framing the inlay of the mother of pearl. As with every guitar that I make, you always wonder what is the end result going to be like? What it's going to sound like? What kind of sound will your replica produce? And while working on this guitar, which took me just over 400 hours, going through the learning curve, making all the various things that I had to make, that thought always stayed with me. What is it going to sound like? And working with such different parameters than you're used to, I don't know what to expect. I was certainly hoping for a very good sound. So when the day came that I put the strings on, very exciting time. Holding thumbs that the guitar will keep that tension of the strings. But anyway, right from the start, I was in love with this guitar. The sound was so rewarding. It was really beautiful. Even on a brand new guitar, those trebles were so sweet, and the bass is beautiful warm. There was a great balance right through, string to string, in the low register, high register, and that's exactly what I was hoping for. I was so surprised, and I gained so much respect for Torres.
We can actually admire two instruments by looking at this one. We cannot help but imagine what the original FE17 that Antonio Torres created for his own use must have looked like. The exceptional craftsmanship and artistry of this instrument does not stop with the visual aspect though. Its sound also has a very beguiling nature. Even with the soft attack, the loudness of the sound comes as quite a surprise, especially when one takes into account the shorter scale length and smaller body. The instrument necessitates more sensitive playing in order to highlight the more poetic aspects in the music. And with this poetic aspect, Tárrega was the doyen. He used short character pieces to introduce the listener to his world, whether it be his family, Maria, his wife, Marietta, his daughter, Pepita, a friend and student, or just the popular musical forms of the period, a valse, pavana, mazurka, tango. It's hard to believe that the original could have been aesthetically more pleasing than this instrument. I think it's the quintessential tribute to a masterpiece. Had Torres been able to see this instrument, I'm sure he would have acknowledged Hans van der Berg as a worthy peer. I'm sure he would have nodded in agreement that Maestro van der Berg also knows the secret that reputedly stayed between Torres' thumb and forefinger. And as with the original Torres of 1864, this Van der Berg of 2017 has a happy marriage of all the various aspects, as well as a few mysterious ones, that make up an exceptional instrument.